So the Avatar: The Last Airbender set is finally here, and man, has it been so refreshing to have a set that has such unique mechanics and really cool commanders to brew. We've got some really awesome stuff with Firebending, some really powerful and exciting Earthbending commanders, and even some commanders that are so powerful they could be ending up getting brews for CEDH power level decks. But there's one commander that I have found from this set that I think is a really underrated powerhouse, and I truly think this slept on commander could be an awesome brew for your next deck. So without any further ado, let's talk about Zhao, Ruthless Admiral. This commander costs 2 generic and 2 hybrid red-black, so you can either cast it for all black, all red, or a combination of the two, which makes it really flexible to cast. And it has Firebending 2, which means when you attack with this creature, you create 2 red, and this mana lasts until the end of combat. So once you leave the combat phase, that mana will disappear, so you need to use it at instant speed. And it has a really powerful ability that I think is the part that makes this commander really exciting, which says, whenever you sack another permanent, creatures you control get +1/+0 until the end of the turn. So when I look at Zhao, and I'm thinking about building around this really powerful ability to just buff up creatures whenever we sack permanents, you need to start thinking about what permanents we're going to be sacrificing. And we've got a lot of options. We could be making a creature sacrifice deck. We could be making a deck based around food or clues. But I think that the most powerful permanents we could be sacrificing in Rakdos colors are treasures. Treasures is a super popular archetype in Commander, and it has a really expensive price tag to match. But with this commander and its ability to buff up creatures, we can use some really underrepresented treasure generators, some outside the box sack outlets, and more importantly, build a game plan around generating treasures that doesn't necessarily have to be heavy on the budget. So because we are focusing on building this deck on a budget, we aren't going to be using some of the most expensive and powerful treasure generators. With that in mind, this deck is no slouch. We've got some awesome treasure synergies that are going to be building up our artifacts, being able to give us tons of permanents to sacrifice, on top of being really solid creatures that we can go to the combat step with. We have a number of creatures that generate treasures when they enter or leave the battlefield, and Patron of the Arts is a perfect example of the number of creatures in our deck that have this kind of effect. Whenever we cast them and they enter the battlefield, we usually can generate 1 or 2 treasure tokens, keeping up, kind of paying back the cost of it and just building up our treasures for future turns. But also, when those creatures leave the battlefield, they can generate that treasure token and potential other value as well. So we also have a number of underrated treasure generators in this deck, and Orochi Soul Reaver is probably the best example of this archetype of creatures in here. We've got a 6-mana creature that has a ninjutsu ability, which allows you to switch it out if the creature that you're attacking with that's in play isn't being blocked. And Orochi says, whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token and manifest the top card of that player's library. So this is very similar to some of the most powerful treasure creatures we know. Think of Grim Hireling, think of Professional Facebreaker. This creature costs more to cast, but if you ninjutsu it in, you get a discount on its mana cost. But in addition to that, we're also getting to manifest the top card of our opponent's library, giving us more creatures on our battlefield. This is one of those, again, underrated treasure generators that you just don't see in these type of like Rakdos and Mardu treasure decks because it has more efficient contemporaries, but it's got a really powerful effect. It helps build up our board of creatures, gives us treasure tokens, and we can cheat it into play using our commander's firebending mana to ninjutsu it into combat. I think this is a great example of an underrated treasures category for the creatures in this deck. And the next category of these creatures are going to be our treasure dragons. Now, dragons and treasure go hand in hand. There are a lot of really powerful ones that command a very hefty price tag, but even in this sub $10 range, the dragons that we have in this deck do some incredible things. And Goldlust Triad is probably the best example of the ones we have in the deck list. So this is a dragon that costs 5 mana to cast. It has flying and it has myriad, meaning whenever you attack with this creature, you also send a token copy that is tapped and attacking to each of your opponents, and you do have to exile those tokens at the end of combat. But it says whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, we create a treasure token. So it's a flying 4/3 that also creates 2 tapped and attacking copies. So we're sending a flyer at each of our opponents, and if they connect, we get to make treasures. This is another really good example. There are a number of evasive creatures in this deck, creatures that have flying, creatures that have menace, creatures that have trample, and our commander's ability to buff up those creatures before and during combat is a really big threat and really what the deck is built around. So this is a really good example of this archetype of flying dragons that make treasure and are going to go out and get even bigger using Zhao's ability when we sacrifice these treasure tokens. But our commander is a sacrifice synergy, so we want to add a couple of abilities for us to sacrifice other creatures, other permanents, or having creatures that sacrifice themselves to also trigger our commander's ability. Impulsive Pilferer, yeah, I said that right. Impulsive Pilferer is one of my favorite treasure cards and is a really good example of a self-sacrificing treasure creature. So it says whenever it dies, we create a treasure token. And when you cast it for 1, that is not as impactful. But what is more impactful is whenever we cast it for its encore cost. So if it's in the graveyard, we can pay 3 generic and a red, exile it, and create a token copy for each of our opponents. Those tokens get haste and we have to attack with them during combat if able. And then at the end of the turn, we have to sacrifice those tokens. And those tokens still have that ability for whenever Impulsive Pilferer dies, we create treasures. One of the most powerful sacrifice creatures in this deck is Fain the Broker. It has the ability to buff up our creatures, create treasure tokens, and create evasive 2/1 Inkling creature tokens with flying. But what's awesome about Fain in this deck is it also has that 4th ability to pay for an untapped Fain, so we can use its ability multiple times. Our commander creates Firebending mana whenever we attack with it, and we can use that 2 red combined with at least 1 black and 1 other type of mana we can find to pay that 4 mana during the combat step to untap Fain and do more of the, tappy shenanigans, buff up our creatures, maybe sack a creature during combat so that we can buff up our creatures during the combat step before our opponents go to blocks. There's so many ways that we can use Fain's sacrifice abilities and treasure creation abilities in this deck, and because we can pay that mana from the Firebending mana our commander generates, it is just a really synergistic creature that allows us to lean into that sacrifice theme. And the last one I need to talk about here is Everyth. This creature has such a soft spot for me. Everyth is such a cool creature, commander. It has a really unique ability. So she is a sacrifice outlet for creatures and artifacts. So we can sacrifice either a creature or an artifact to put a +1/+1 counter on Everyth. And if that sacrifice permanent was a treasure, she gains lifelink until the end of the turn, but we can only activate that at sorcery speed. So we can't use this as kind of a combat trick or anything during the combat step like our commander can do. This is something we have to do either in our main phase or our second main phase. But Everyth has another really spicy ability. Whenever Everyth dies, you may pay 1 generic and either hybrid, red-black, and when you do, Everyth deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. So not only does she synergize with herself by putting a bunch of +1/+1 counters whenever we're sacrificing our treasure tokens or whenever we're sacrificing our creatures to her ability, but if Everyth dies, we then get to pay 2, which is the mana that we can use from our commander. This ability can be activated at instant speed. We can use our commander's Firebending mana or other mana that we have available to us to pay the 2 mana and deal her power's worth of damage to the entire table. This is a game ender. This is a creature that has the ability to just absolutely take over the game. She's really powerful, and for $6.50, we did use a pretty sizable amount of the budget to put this creature in. she's worth it. She is so worth it. This is an amazing creature that synergizes with our commander as well, because we can grow her power by sacrificing treasure tokens that are on the board. And we can sacrifice those to her ability to double down on that power growth. This is a 1-2 punch that seems like it was meant for this commander, and Everyth is definitely an auto include if you're building out Zhao and building this treasures focused version of this deck. Like I mentioned earlier, evasive creatures are the bread and butter of how this deck wins. We need our commander to buff up creatures that have the ability to get through, not just creatures that are going to get gummed up at the combat step. So we have a number of creatures that are either going to be evasive themselves or help us generate creature tokens that can have flying or trample that are going to be able to get this damage through. Loke, Treasure Hunter, has the ability that it cannot be blocked by creatures that have greater power than it. So if we're going to the combat step and swinging for it, anything that is 3 power or greater just can't block Loke. So it is going to survive combat most of the time. But Loke also has that mug ability that says whenever it attacks, each player mills a card, and if a land card was milled this way, create a treasure token. Until the end of turn, you may cast a spell from among those cards. So Loke has the ability to give us card advantage, and the fact that we look at 4 cards off of the mills, and very likely one of those is going to be a land. If we're looking at, 3 opponents in our deck, there's a very high chance that we're going to at least create 1 treasure token off of this. But then in addition to that, we're getting to look at a bunch of cards. And what's great about Loke is that when he attacks, he is a 2 power creature. So our opponents are going to have to be really selective with how they block. Unless they have 1/1s, this is going to be able to be unblockable. But during the combat step, after blocks are declared, we can sacrifice a bunch of treasure tokens or sack a creature with one of our sack outlets and buff up the power at that point to hit somebody in the face for more than whenever we attacked with him. So this is a cheeky creature. It's got some really unique interactions with combat, and it also gives us treasures and gives us card advantage. Loke is an incredible card for this deck. Atsushi the Blazing Sky, I mean, come on. It's not only is it, kind of feel like it fits into the Avatar theme of the deck, but it's also card advantage. It has flying and trample. We're going to buff up the power of this creature when we crack treasures. We're going to be able to create treasures if it dies during the combat step to keep the game plan going. And it is just a perfect example of an efficient creature that's got tons of powerful abilities on it. It fits really well in the budget thanks to the Tarkir Dragonstorm set at just $2 as of recording, and is a really perfect example of the creatures that our commander wants to synergize with directly. We also have that ability to choose. If it dies and we need some card advantage, we could exile the top 2 cards of our library, and until the end of the next turn, we could play those cards. So an absolute powerhouse of a creature, definitely one that fits perfectly into this evasive creatures section of the deck. And the last, and probably an omega tier threat in this deck, is the RMS Titanic. So RMS Titanic costs 3 generic and a red. It is an artifact vehicle. So this is technically not a creature until you tap a creature that you do have in play for 3 to crew this vehicle, which, by the way, our commander is a 3 power creature, so that's not going to be a problem at all. And it says whenever the RMS Titanic deals combat damage to a player, we sacrifice it and we create that many treasure tokens. Well, our commander has the ability to pump creature's power when we sacrifice permanents. So not only is this a huge threat at already 7 power, potentially making 7 treasure tokens, we can grow that power even bigger to 8, 9, 10, 20 if we have enough treasures in play. This thing can get out of control so fast and synergizes directly with what our commander wants to be doing, buffing up creatures by sacking treasures to make more treasures. It's so good. Like I said, this is probably the most powerful card in the deck. So cool, so perfect for this theme, and one that I would highly recommend you run with Zhao in this treasures focus list. We need to have a talk. We need to take a second and talk about the fact we're running a treasures deck But we're still running a lot of usual suspects when it comes to traditional ramp spells. We have our Soul Ring, we have our Arcane Signet, we've got Felwar Stone, Mind Stone, Rakdos Signet, Talisman of Indulgence. Why are we running a traditional ramp package in a deck that has so many cards focused on making treasure tokens? The reason that we want to do this is because in decks that have treasures as their primary win condition, you need to be very careful about using your treasure tokens in the early game to accelerate your mana versus using them in the mid and the late game to help you execute your win condition. The game plan with this deck is treasures is how you win. So we need to make sure that we're not using them to accelerate us in the first 1 to 3 turns of the game. That's why it's really important to still run a healthy number of artifact-based ramp spells. That being said, there are a couple of important cards I do want to call out, Collector's Vault being a really big one. Our commander has the ability to generate 2 red whenever we attack with it with its Firebending ability. Well, it just so happens that Treasure Vault has an activated ability that costs 2 mana to draw a card, discard a card, and create a treasure token. So this perfectly synergizes with what our commander is doing. Let's talk card draw. So our commander has its Firebending mana ability to create 2 red. And you'll notice because of that, we've got a lot of red instant speed draw spells that aren't necessarily going to give us card advantage, but they are going to be able to lean in to that mana we generate during combat. Thrill of Possibility is the perfect example of what I'm talking about. During the combat step, we attack with our commander, we generate 2 red off of Firebending, and now we pay 2 mana into Thrill of Possibility. Demand Answers, one of my favorite cards. I've talked about it in some of the other videos on this channel, and in this deck is even more powerful because we're making so many artifact tokens. It's also a sacrifice synergy. So you pay 2 red at instant speed, and it says as an additional cost to cast this spell, we either sacrifice an artifact or we discard a card. So you go to the combat step, you attack with Zhao, you get that 2 Firebending mana, you use it to cast Demand Answers, sacrifice a treasure token to pay for that additional cost. Not only are you getting the ability to just go for card advantage, we're drawing 2 cards when we sack an artifact, we don't have to discard, but we also get our commander's ability to buff up all of the creatures on our board because we sacrificed an artifact. And the last one that I want to talk about in this draw section is another great example of synergizing with our commander's Firebending and also helping with our treasure synergies in Ruthless Knave. For 2 generic and a black, lets us sacrifice a creature and create 2 treasure tokens. But it also lets us sacrifice 3 treasure tokens to draw a card. Not only can we use this as a card draw spell when we have our surplus of treasure tokens, it also triggers our commander when we're sacrificing either the creatures or the treasures, but we can use that activated ability with our Firebending mana to pay for the 2 generic. This is a really good example of a card that it's budget because in normal circumstances, we're not going to have the 3 mana. We're not going to want to pay that much mana and go down on a creature just to make 1 treasure. But with a commander that generates 2 red every combat when we attack with it, this downside gets significantly mitigated. Now we're only paying 1 black, and that is a much better rate. Now we're actually going mana positive because for that 1 black mana that we're paying, we're getting 2 treasures off of it. This is a creature that I've always wanted to find room for in treasure decks, but I just never seem to be able to. And the fact that it really works with our commander's Firebending ability to pay those activated ability costs, so sweet, great include in the deck. Now I'll quickly go over the interaction suite before we conclude this video. This is one area in your deck where you can accidentally end up spending a lot of money. And we've gone with some classic spells, but we've also gone with some budget-focused options. You've got your classics, Abrade, Feed the Swarm, but you've also got some treasure-focused ones like Hell to Pay and Spiteful Banditry, which we've used a noticeable amount of this $100 budget on. So Rose Room Treasurer is not just a treasure generator, it's a really powerful interaction spell. So it has the ability Alliance that says whenever another creature you control enters, create a treasure token if it is the first or the second time this ability resolved this turn. Otherwise, you may pay X. And when you do, Rose Room Treasurer deals X damage to any target. This is a really interesting removal piece that is repeatable turn after turn and can also be ways to just close out games. We can send that damage directly at one of our opponents. And that X cost we pay can be any amount of mana. If we have 20 mana on board because we have a ton of treasures available, we could just deal 20 damage to one person's face. So Rose Room Treasurer, one of those cards that I don't see that often in treasure decks, but one that I find has a ton of potential and one that for the price seems like a perfect include into the interaction suite for this deck. And so with that, we've talked about the most underrated commander from the Avatar set, Zhao, Ruthless Admiral, and we've built a really popular archetype in Commander. Treasures, people love treasures, and it's usually really expensive to build. So we have shown that you can build treasures on a budget. As of recording, this deck is currently $103 on Moxfield. I know I'm kind of creeping up above 100. But this is a really powerful Rakdos sacrifice deck that is going to really help you win games. And if you're focused on being a budget player, these are the best kind of commanders you can find. Treasures is one of those archetypes I absolutely love. And you guys know, I've got a couple of budget decks on this channel. I'm a big believer that budget should not be the reason that you can't go play games of Commander, and commanders like Zhao are perfect examples of how we can build powerful synergistic decks that don't have to cost an arm and a leg. If you liked this video, please let me know by liking it, and let me know in the comments section if you had any thoughts about this deck. What ways would you upgrade this deck, and what are some of the powerful treasure creatures, dragons, other treasure generators like Descent into Avernus? Like, what are some of the cards you would add if you didn't have a budget limit on this awesome commander deck from the new Avatar set? My name is Clear Reason. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.